Imagine this, you wake up tomorrow and hypothetically, the market drops 30%. My question to you is this, how are you gonna react? What do you do? The answer could be costing you money. We're gonna talk about emotions and investing today on Mindset. Let's go. Welcome back to Mindset. I'm Brad Barrett, this is producer Jared. Today we're talking about emotions. So I hope you all grabbed your warm cup of coffee, you're sitting on the couch with your blanket, ready to release some energy today. Jared, would you say you're an emotional person?
I am not. I'm technically,
Really?
I think I'm a little more, my wife says I'm a little more logical.
Yeah.
A little more, I don't go off the,
Off the tangents.
off the handle.
I'm probably the opposite in my personal life. If I'm candid, I get a little, a little angsty, a little rock and roll, and my wife Veronica is actually more the logical, sane one. So
A little rock and roll, I like that.
Yeah, we got a little back and forth there. But we want to talk about emotions, and it's probably one of the most important topics, quite honestly, when it comes to our investing. Like your personal experiences and what you've lived through, good or bad, affect how you invest, affect how you look at money. When the reality is in your myopic little world of what's happening, good or bad, you think that's how the world works when it comes to money. And the reality is there's a whole big bad world that's still operating just the same. And that's what we want to bring to light today when we talk about emotions, whether they're good or bad. And we're going to talk about all of that today. But I had to bring that up because I have a lot of clients that I talk to that, they come in with fear and anxiety. And even when we talked about in the open, right? It's like when the market drops, what are you going to do? The market drops 30%. What's your initial reaction?
Sell. And I tell you what, I think it's logical, but I think it would be more emotionally driven, even from somebody that's like, I'm a logical person.
Yeah.
But I would probably sell, and it's probably more emotional.
And you're not
response.
alone in that. That's why we started with that. It wasn't a hook. It wasn't a grab. I didn't mean to gotcha moment. It really is something that's our knee jerk. And we're going to talk about that, about the rational and the emotional. We're going to bring that up today. And the ultimate question is, are emotions good or bad for investing?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to solve today. To do that, I want to start somewhere. We're going to go back into, I've been open about this for many, many years. I highly recommend it. My wife and I, we do individually, we do therapy every month. We've done it for many, many years. We've worked on ourselves with childhood traumas, circumstantial things that have gone through our life, as I hope many of you are too. It's a great age that we live in.
Great tool. More people should be using that.
Absolutely.
It's always about the mother.
And in that, what I found very interesting, and this has to do with money, I promise you, is how our brain works. It's kind of a fascinating thing. The way God built us is really beautiful if you really look at it. There are two primary parts of the brain that are involved with financial decisions. Well, frankly, any decisions. It's the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So we're gonna get science on here.
Chlorophyll? More like borophyll. Right?
I'm gonna read through what these are. You can look into this for yourself as well. But the amygdala is a major center within the brain where our intuition, our emotions, our perception of risk or reward, this is where this is, and first impressions, this is where they all originate. And it causes us to seek and really ultimately crave things like rewards. This is also true of most of the things that we enjoy in life. This could be sex, money, alcohol, drugs. I mean, this is a lot to do with addictions. It has a lot to do with the center of how we think. It's often called the ancient brain.
Well, yeah, that pleasure center. Where you're feeling what you're taking in.
Yeah.
Want to be good, want to feel good.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting, the amygdala came to light for me. It's also the risk reward center. Did you ever see that, what was that, Free Solo? Did you ever see that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Remember they did like a
Love
study
it.
on his brain and how like his amygdala was like enlarged, and I was thinking about it, because I'm like, how does a guy free scale a mountain and just not have any fear? So to that point, I mean, we are wired a little bit differently. So when we talk about emotions, digging into your inner person of who you are, not what your friend circle is, what your parents are, what you kind of live through with money context, like good and bad. If you really dive into who you are, you'll be able to be a really successful investor.
Know thyself.
Know thyself. Ooh, deep. The second part of the brain is what's called the prefrontal cortex, right here. This is where logic prevails. So this is kind of where the amygdala meets its logical partner. This is along with the ability and able to consider pros and cons of any idea in this world, any investment you might be making. The good and the bad, the pros and the cons. It lies directly behind our forehead. and it's often called the reflective brain. Based on these descriptions, you can probably see that there is probably conflict a lot.
Well, I think it's fascinating that, like, if you actually look at the biology of it,
Yeah.
that prefrontal cortex is a large portion of your brain. The amygdala is a little bean,
Little tiny one.
little tiny one, and yet that little thing can take control over everything above all else without reason and without.
It's unbelievable
Cause.
how true that is. And think about your life in general. This is where addictions can come in. Hey, this one thing caused you pleasure, so when you get tired, stressed, or angry, do that and you'll be okay. This is kind of, in a way, a very layman's breakdown of how those two work together.
Yeah, we are not Bill Nye. We are not scientists.
Bill Nye, the science guy. Remember that guy? Now, those are the two main parts we're going to talk about, and then we're going to get into how this plays into. Because ultimately today, I want to talk to you about, are emotions good or bad when it comes to your investing life? Let's start with the more popular side, I think, for many, that emotions are bad for investing.
This is what I've always heard.
This is what I've always heard too, and I have some points to make on this, but let's go to some people that I think we all would consider successful investors. And I think the first one we got to go to is Warren Buffett. This is what Warren Buffett said. I can't recall any time in the history of Berkshire that we made an emotional decision. That's a pretty bold statement if you think about it.
That's big.
Right? And he goes on to say, you don't want to be a no emotion person in all of your life, but you definitely want to be a no emotion person when making an investment or business decision.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
No emotions. Robots.
But shut it down when you're about to hit that trade on an investment. These are bold statements by one of the most successful investors out there. Now, I think it's important as we talk about these quotes to transitions, why are our emotions bad? So I said that they might be, and I think it's a popular opinion, but why? If I were to ask you that, and you guys can watch, you can comment on this as well, but Jared, why do you think emotions, in your view, are bad for investing?
I mean, you tend to pull the trigger faster. You don't think, even though your emotions might be real, like, oh, I have that fear, that panic. You might not be taking all the information in,
correct,
or really looking at all that. And it might just be like, pull the trigger. I mean, like going off half-cocked, these things like that. It's not known to ever make emotional fast decisions, but that's what you tend to do, especially with your money.
And we tend to do it, you hit a key term there, which I want to talk about, is biases. We don't realize, but we have this kind of like subconscious auto-generated thing happening all the time. Our brain takes in a lot of what we feel or see subliminally. And look, I can't miss this point. Anxiety and fear is a big deal here. We live in a world that makes us more angsty than I think in any time in history. Now, you can combat that statement and say, well, Brad, we have had world wars, and that's all true, but we have those going on while also being fed information that we don't know is true or not all the time through our phones now. The access to things is just so all the time. It's no longer a newspaper the next morning. It's no longer waiting for the 6 p.m. news to tell us what's up. Like, this is happening constantly throughout the day, these little hits that are happening. So anxiety and fear is a real deal.
And I've shared with you, I've made one specific example in the past where I was watching a particular investment. I had the app. I see it just crashing down. I'm watching this thing for an hour. I can just see it going down, and just this emotion just built up, and it was fear, like, that's my money, and I sold.
Yep.
And if I would have just put that down and walked away, let's just say, it's worth a lot more now.
And there's reasons for that. I think everyone watching this right now has likely, if you're an investor in this world and have been involved, you've probably had that feeling or that notion. I know I have.
And it's the worst.
It's worse
feeling.
But what's interesting about that is you don't realize it. And this is where I have help with clients is, okay, like imagine I was in that room with you right there. I would ask you one question, and it's one word. Why? Why are you so concerned about losing your money? Obviously, I know it's a dumb way to state that because, well, it's my money, dude.
It is. It's my money.
But here's the thing. What I see more often, there's been a lot of studies on this, is like it's less about the monetary value of the loss. It's more what it says about you to your wife, to yourself, to your community, to your relationships, maybe people you've talked to about this investment. We talked about before, you were in a group that was investing in this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a societal norm in this that if you lose, you're a failure.
But and I agree with you. Like, I remember thinking, if this goes down, I bought it because I wanted,
Yeah.
I have a mortgage. I have things I have to
Yeah.
pay for. And when you start seeing that money go down, well, I'm worth less, all I'm thinking is, drastic measures like my house, my cars, I have bills.
Yeah.
Like there's things on the line is what I'm saying.
And I agree with you, and those are real. The planner in me wants to say, and this is a rule we talked about a week or two ago on our show as well, which is making sure that your investing life stays in a channel within your overall money life. If you dip over, imagine you have like 3 channels, like your cash flow, your short-term savings for like, you're just, the AC blows out or you want to take a trip with your boys to Vegas or whatever it is. And the third one's your investing life. If your investing like dips over into one of those other categories, the fear and anxiety sets in a little bit more because now you got more things relying on it.
Right.
But if it's over here and it's budgeted in that way for that, you can, so remember, these are tools to remove some of these things. I can't remove the fact that you're a human being. That's a real thing, okay? No one's gonna remove that from you. But if you categorize it differently for yourself, you give yourself more of an opportunity for success.
So you're saying this investment over here, if I lose, worst case scenario, and that goes to 0, it's not going to affect, I'm not going to lose my home.
Bingo.
Yeah, okay.
And that's a dramatic statement, but the reality is we all do this. We kind of blur the lines. We blur too much, or we put too much weight on certain areas. By the way, that has to do with the Benjamin Graham quote, right? So he's the father of economics, wrote security analysis, like big quote. His big quote, and I think is really important, I've said this before on our show, is that the investor, you and I, our chief problem and likely our worst enemy is ourself. That, again, I said this a couple weeks ago, in fact, if we realize that, then we need to work on that and figure it out, okay? Because that's how we help ourselves be more successful. Being candid with you guys, the reason why I got into this business when I was 16 is my father worked for a very large telecommunications company, worked there for like 20 years, and one day the company went bankrupt. He was a company man. I revere my father, I look up to him. And he made himself back, which is really impressive. But being a 16-year-old at the time, about to get my car, I remember the summer vividly. I mean, everything changed. We lost everything. So as an advisor, when clients come in and say, well, Brad, what if I lose everything? I try to tell people, like, I've actually been in that position. And so that circumstantially brought me to why I'm speaking to you here today. I mean, it's a really big, important thing to make sure that we hone into both parts of that about ourselves. I knew that I wanted to learn from a knowledge perspective everything I could about money, and my purpose was this, so that what happened to my dad never happened to me or my family. And the second part was I wanted to help people. I wanted to take that experience and all the knowledge I was learning in this whole environment and be able to speak into people's lives about this. Because at the end of the day, God actually calls us when he gives you money, when he gives you wealth, whatever it might be, and mind you, there's no number on this, the term wealth, there's no number on this, okay? Whatever he provides to you, money, Rick Warren says, I love this, money's like manure. If you let it sit there, it's gonna stink. But if you spread it around, it's gonna grow.
I like that. That's nice.
And it's a really cool thing to remember as we give these things out, as we remove some of these biases. If we hoard it, if we're putting too much merit on it, we get really tight in our grip and we have more fear, more anxiety. And we tend to make decisions, no different than what you just mentioned, Jared, about selling or maybe you shouldn't.
So I admit I thought I was a logical guy, but when I look at some investings, I might be a little more emotional with my money. I mean, it's a great tip to just say, keep those compartmentalized.
Yeah.
From a financial planner perspective, what are some other tips that I might help me fight those emotions?
The first one that comes to mind is a plan. And I know it sounds super boring, and I say it all the time. I get it. I know the financial advisor me, but like, here's the deal. If you have a plan and you have things lined up, you're less emotional about it. There's a pragmatic approach you're taking to it, which instinctively, I don't know the numbers on this, I don't have any, but instinctively it removes percentage of emotion out of it. Now, yes, life will throw us curveballs. As the old saying goes, as I say all the time, life's, you have a plan to get punched in the face. So that's all true. You have to have some backup plans, some scenarios. So that's the first thing that comes to mind by and large. The bucket planning I think is huge as well. We talked about that. Making sure your investing life stays in this bucket so it doesn't bleed over into your debt payments or your cash flow or your short-term savings. Did that make sense? How I walked through some of the ways to help us all remove emotions when it comes to investing?
Absolutely. And I tell you what, sadly enough, I don't know, but I don't typically do that in investing, but I do that in everything else. I make
Yeah.
plans, like my to-do list. So it just makes sense to.
That's so funny you say that. One of the things I tell clients all the time is I would argue that any one of you spend more time scheduling or planning a family trip than you do your investing life or your retirement.
Oh, 100%. That's me.
A lot of us are guilty of that.
Yeah.
Now, I get it. Here's two main reasons I realize why. One is it's sooner than retirement.
Yeah.
So it's more like on the cusp, immediate satisfaction.
What I have to do today.
Exactly. The second part is it tends to be more enjoyable. And by the way, I tend to agree with that second part because, yeah, you can stockpile a bunch of money and that's all great, but ultimately you want to use it. So I do agree, like you should spend time on, making memories, spending time with the ones you love. Like that's really important. But don't over prioritize your planning there when you realize you wake up one day and you are 7 years old. I hate to break to you, I don't care what age you're listening to me right now. I've worked in this business for over 20 years now. I've seen clients through that entire transition get into their 70s, and they even told me themselves, they're like, yeah, I didn't think I'd make it to 70, but here I am. I'm sure glad I had an investing life. I'm sure glad I had you as an advisor in a retirement life.
Well, it's really hard. It's really hard today to be like, well, future Jared's going to need this.
Yes.
Well, right now, Jared needs this.
Correct.
Let me just take care of Jared right now.
One example I always use, my wife and I, Veronica is a saint. She has everything, she wants everything to be clean the night before so when we wake up. And her statement has always been something to the extent of like, be kind to your tomorrow self. And as much as like we're doing dishes at like 9 o'clock after putting the kids down and having dinner and doing the sports stuff, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm done. I want to go to bed. I'm out, Every morning I wake up, I love that the kitchen's clean and the dishes are done. And it's hard to do that. And it's choose your hard, right? I could easily gone to bed an hour earlier and done that. But and yes, it's a day later versus 30 years later, but there is something to be said about your tomorrow self. Like be kind to your tomorrow self.
Your tomorrow self will always love your past self for doing it.
At the end of the day, from a financial decision, you're either going to get paid for the financial decisions you make today or pay for the financial decisions you made today. Which do you choose? That's ultimately what it comes down to. So let's talk about the other sides. We talked about the popular side of emotions being bad. And again, don't take this in a draconian way of like bad. But you talked about, you can see why it could be construed as bad. So getting control of that's important. But emotions can be good for investing. We tend to, as investors, often base investment decisions on the ebbs and flows of whatever's going on in the economy, the economic market, right? So emotional investing, if you think about it, if you break it down, is when your cycle, the flow of life, the flow of the market life, I should say, of market emotions influences your investment decisions. So again, if what you see going on in the market influences how you invest, you're emotionally investing. That's key point number one, okay? Now, I think if you follow strategies that can help balance emotion and logic, you can avoid making emotional investing mistakes. So it doesn't mean emotions are bad, it just means you have to avoid the mistakes. Think of herd, there's a lot of biases you can go through here. One that comes to mind is crowd theory or herd mentality. You're making an emotional decision because you think everyone around you is doing it and therefore it's good.
Right. Something's crashing, everyone's selling. I better jump on board. I don't want to be the last one holding the...
That whole FOMO thing, that's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
But that is an emotional decision. So again, the emotional of that, that might be the mistake. But you can still bring emotions into it. The motivation's an emotion. Motivation to get your finances in order, that's good. That gets you going, right? Discipline, right? I don't know you classify that as an emotion per se, but if you marry discipline and motivation, you're gonna typically have a successful anything you're doing, whether that's working out, diet, investing, doesn't matter, debt repayments, all of it. So I think reframing decisions that kind of, one way I tell people is like take a breath, take a beat, right? If you're gonna make that decision at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go to dinner, have a glass of wine, sleep on it. Take a beat, right? You're essentially enacting a waiting period that I think will allow logic and emotion to work together versus one taking over. I think, again, I've said this before, the way emotional investing can be good is to tune into who you are. I mean, after all, emotions, again, can often motivate us to save. That's the whole key to this thing. So that's the kickoff of emotions, right?
If you're using it, I love my kids. I want to give them a college education.
There you go.
I want to use that emotion to help build.
You love your wife, your spouse, and you want to help them succeed in a passion. Maybe they're working a job right now that they're not stoked on, and you want to financially set yourself up to where that person can then go and start their own business or something that they're passionate about. This is emotion. This is love for self, love for family, right? These are all good things. Hope. One thing, one of my partners here at the firm, he said something to me a long time ago. He's actually our managing director of portfolio trading. He said, you can take a lot away from a man, but if you take away hope, that's when it's scary. Yeah. And you think about that, hope's an emotion in a way. Like, you gotta have hope for the future, right? And these are all things, again, that back into motivating us to start investing. It's a powerful driver. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I would say if you lose hope in the economy, the market, I'm assuming it can be devastating for your wealth building.
Absolutely.
You just stopping like, there's no hope. Why do this anymore?
Why bother? And that's when you start wanting to seek counsel, seek help with that kind of stuff. Because end of the day, acknowledging that our emotions are part of what drives our behavior and ultimately our comfort level with investing is very valuable. Like, I don't want to discount that. That's very valuable, okay? So, we have to, in a way, anticipate how emotions might affect our investing behavior and to prevent emotional investing mistakes. Again, this is not about emotions being, it's how to prevent the mistakes.
It's recognizing your emotions, your reactions, and then using that to your benefit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said. Perfect.
So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
On this whole debate, we've set up two sides of the coin. Where do you sit on this as a financial planner, as somebody that sits with people and in their investing?
Meaning emotions being good or bad when it comes to investing?
What should I do?
I guess I'd say I'm 51-49, right? I kind of see it both ways. I do think the motivation, the part of why we invest is emotional. I think that's a good thing, I'll also say this. I would say emotions tend to be more worse than good when it comes to investing. Largely because, and this is just a statement I've seen, and let's all be real, largely because we don't have control of our emotions, most of us. You've heard this, the emotional elephant and the rational man theory. So you got to think of a man riding an elephant, okay? The rational part of our mind, which is the rider, the man on top of the elephant, likes to believe it is in charge, okay? That's the rational mind. It likes to believe it's in charge of our emotions. And in many circumstances, it is. It's controlling it. It's working. It's logic. It makes sense. But when crisis erupts or something happens, we've talked about this. This is the whole getting punched in the face with life situation, right? Emotions tend to take charge. Emotions being the elephant in this case. The elephant then revolts against the rider. And in this kind of a conflict, the primitive, like, brute strength of an elephant, if you just think of just the sheer physical size of it compared to a human being, right, will win every time. So if you think about it, if you have something that's out of control, it's kind of running our life, back to the prefrontal cortex, right? If it's running our life, then it's gonna tend to make some mistakes. This whole robo environment and AI and all this stuff about investing, I get asked this question a lot, like, what if I just do that? Can that take over? Or even the DIY, the do-it-yourself, where it's like, I don't need an advisor, I'm gonna do it myself. This is gonna sound crazy coming from an advisor, and we manage over $7 billion for clients. We've been doing this for a long time. We like to think we know what we're doing, okay? I actually agree with you. If you can do it yourself and you can use whatever tools you have out there, go for it. You do you. But I always ask this question, it's like, do you really think you can control your emotions during a March of 2020, when everything around you, the global pandemic, is going down? During 2008, when the great financial crisis happened, many who watching might not have even been around at that point, but any time period you can see where there's something kind of cathartic happening in your life, if you can truly control that, then yes, doing it yourself, being robotic about it will work. I don't know about you, but if you're watching this, you're not a robot. You're a human being with emotions that are good, and it's very hard to control that.
Again, I've said this, I call myself a logical person. I was put to the test on my own DIY investing, and I failed.
And you're not alone. Everyone wants to try it, and I say try it. Tell me, but be honest. You learned about yourself that way. No, I learned from our failures.
I learned a lot. I learned when I'm pressed like that, I made an emotional decision.
Yeah.
And I was back to your herd mentality. My herd did the same.
There you go.
All emotional decisions. And we all paid the price for it.
Yeah, and there's a multitude of reasons for that. That's why it's hard to uncover. It's kind of like the iceberg theory. Like, you see the tip of the iceberg, and then you don't forget all that's going underneath it. We make the decisions on this part. But the reality is that decision, that actual action we take, comes from all the stuff below.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to bring up. So the more you know yourself, the more you use your emotions for good, I think is important. But that's a good question. So some final thoughts here when it comes to your emotions. Contextualize what it is you're thinking and understand where it's coming from. That's the basis of good emotional investing. Spend the time, as much time as you're gonna plan your summer vacation, spend the time to focus on yourself and figure out, if you're investing emotionally or rationally, and hopefully doing it in concert with each other.
Yeah, God made us with logic and emotion. Use them both to your advantage.
Bingo, well said. I hope you enjoyed that today. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, share this video, bookmark it if you're ever feeling down one time and want to go back to what we said. We hope this touched you today a little bit, and we spoke to some people about what they might be going through. We always love everyone who's been sharing this video and commenting, so we do appreciate you all. Thank you to all of our subscribers and clients watching. And next week on our show, we're gonna be talking about...
Massive. How to build wealth.
Ooh, that's really good. I like that one. I have a lot to say on that.
I want more wealth. I want to learn.
And it's okay. So the first thing I want to say is it's okay to want to build your wealth. It's good. It's actually a biblical principle, believe it or not. So don't think like you're materialistic with it. It's a good thing. So stay tuned next week. And always remember, lead with love and you'll be all right. See you next week.